Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. I know this is our third event in a row this week, so I see some of you have come to two of the events, so thank you for being so dedicated when you're in your busy schedules. I'm Yael Aronoff. I'm the director of the Michael E. Lane Sterling Institute for Jewish Studies in Modern Israel. Before I introduce our amazing speaker that some of you heard from yesterday, I just want to remind you of a couple upcoming events we're having. On Tuesday, October 1st, we're going to have Mohammed Darwashi speak about a documentary that we're showing, Children of Peace, and he will discuss the film from 12:40 to 2:30 in the Natural Resources Building. There are flyers that on your way out you can take with descriptions of that, but especially at this challenging and difficult time, the documentary is about a Neve Shalom, a place in Israel that tries to promote coexistence between Palestinians and Jewish Israelis, and so he'll be talking about that. And then he'll be doing double duty, like Professor Nechumi Yaffe has done with us, and he'll give a lecture at 5:30 in this building in Club Spartan, just one classroom down, on Arab citizens of Israel between Palestinian national identity and Israeli civic identity. So I highly recommend both of those events on Tuesday. And I also want to I know some of you are students that came here from classes that count for a Jewish Studies minor. So we also have information in the table outside if you want to pick up about becoming a Jewish Studies minor, and you can always talk to me and reach out to me about it. And if for those of you who'd like to get emails of our events, or you can sign up for that as well. So I'd like to introduce Professor Nechumi Yaffe. She did an incredible discussion that she led yesterday. She has a ton of expertise. This is her second time at MSU. She came a few years ago when we were showing the Israeli film Women's Balcony, which was about I think, Sephardic synagogue in Jerusalem, and kind of issues, gender issues that come up in that synagogue. And Professor Yaffe did an amazing job doing that. She is the first Israeli ultra-Orthodox woman to get her PhD in Israel, and is a professor in the public policy department at Tel Aviv University. She tells me that now there are 100 women or so that are on their way to doing that, but she certainly paved the way. And so she introduces, we all want kind of diverse lived experiences in our research and in our teaching, and Nechumi Yaffe really provides an eye-opening service by the research she does on the diversity within the Ultra-Orthodox community and how it's expanding. And she's doing incredible research and constantly putting out research. And so it's really an honor for us to be with you, and thank you for joining us. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this warm words and this very warm welcome. Thank you very much. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. As walking today, Vera just hosted me for the day. She walked me through the campus, and I think it's so green and nice, and some of the leaves are changing, the colors, and it's just such a pleasure to be here. Toda. Thank you very much. So today I actually am very excited about this opportunity, because it was like a chance to bring together a set of research that I've been doing on this topic. And in a way, every research is I search. So it is connected to who I am as a person, but understanding my community, other communities, and, social fabrics and social dynamics. So the work everything is published. One thing is going to be, it's accepted. So it's going to be a few weeks it's published. And then I'm going to have another line, which we all, work for. And I'm going to be talking about deviation from social norms. And when I do research on the Haredi community, most of the time I'm trying to see the Haredi community as a field case study for human experiences. Because at the end of the day, we all made up from the same fabric, but in a very controlled, raw kind of community, some of the social phenomena are very clear. So actually, it's a great opportunity to examine some of the, the theories and some of the ideas using the community. Another thing that I'm doing, it's kind of my research, and I'm going to get back to it right at the end, is I'm pooling the community and producing data on various issues on a weekly basis. So that gives me a very rare opportunity. I'm very fortunate to just get data on the community. So kind of expands my opportunity. We are all surrounded by social norms. If we're going to look around the room, we all dress in the ways that are going to be very easy to recognize us as Westerns, are belonging to a certain era. When we look at pictures from people from previous, generation, we know where to locate them, just because they are obeying so many social norms that are clues to their social, acceptance agreements. So our daily behavior is actually governed by two kind of sets of rules. The rules of law, which are very prescribed and explicit ways of behaviors, like stopping at a red light, if you're American, not if you're Israeli, or some of the social norms. And when you are transgressing those things, you're being punished. You're being punished when you pass the law, obviously, it's very clear, but you're also being punished when you are deviating from the social norms. But social norms are everywhere, and if we recycle or don't recycle, it is a social norms. Women going to math, or the lack of women from stat, is a social norm. And bullying in schools, it's social norms. It's just affect our daily behavior. Most of the historical research usually dealt with conformity to law. And most of the, seminal work was really looking at the question, why people conform. It was, most of social psychology developed after World War II. Some scientists woke up in the morning and was like, how come normal people walk up in the morning, give a kiss to their children and wife, and want to kill people? How such a phenomena happens? And most of the work was around conformity. So people were looking, there's this very famous Ash study, Milgram study, Zimbardo. So we have the figures of authority kind of experiments. We have the Zimbardo prison experiment, and we have the group thinking of Ash. Very large studies that looked at the question, why do people conform to norms? Why are they conforming? And this line of research had produced many line of work. But recent years has moved the shift, and instead of started looking at deviation. So first, let's just pause for a minute and try to understand, why do people observe social norms? So the first thing is law and order, coordination and security. When we know at which side of the street we're driving, and this is a common behavior. Organized when we know how far is the distance to keep when we talk to each other, because this is a social norm. In Asia, you can really stand closer to people. And in the Western society, you have to keep a certain distance. And when you walk into someone else's space, it's weird, right? It's a social clue. When someone does not observe it, it's hey, it's weird, right? So this is a kind of organized. It's the first function of social norms is organizing our behavior. The second function is, when we deviate, this is a social signal that we send it to the world that we don't get it. There is something off. We don't get what the norm. So norms kind of tells us within, without. We observe social norms because when we deviate, we feel guilty and wrong. Do you remember when you skipped school and you felt guilty? So kind of social norms kind of make sure you behave, right? And their function is to make you feel guilty when you deviate. And all of it really leads to deviation threatens our relationship with the community. And when we deviate, we threaten our relationship with the community, and we don't want to risk it. We don't want to risk our relationship with the community because this will risk our identity, the question of who we are, because we are identifying ourselves based on our community. We're gonna go more into it. However, the very progress of society depends on people deviating the norms. The reason why we have so many women sitting here today is because some women deviated, right? And they changed the norm. And they made it accepted for women to sit in a class, right? Any human progress depends on people actually stepping out of the norm. So actually, when you think of it, part of human laws is deviation. I mean, part and parcel. It's not just to confirm, it's to deviate. Deviate is also part of the norm, okay? And since we know it is so important, I mean, Durkheim, a very famous sociologist, actually said that, society is kind of counts on people deviating from norms. It has a necessity. So it is important if we want to initiate social change, we have to understand those deviators and understand their psychology and to know, can we play around it? Can we initiate it? Can we, even from a policy point of view, if you want people to deviate, you have to understand the phenomena. So the question, what makes some people violate norms more than others? And how can we understand the development of deviation from a social psychology perspective? This is Sally Ride. She was the first American woman astronaut, And she deviated from the norm in many ways. She was a lesbian, she was out about it, and she was an astronaut, She just pursued it and actually led the way for so many women to pursue their career in some other interesting ways. So when we look in history, in a set of studies done with my collaborators, they're looking at the hypothesis that people that are deviator have a feeling that they are different to begin with. Actually, when we look historically on major historical figures, we kind of spot that they were different. So if we look at the biggest religious leaders, so Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, they all have a very similar story. They were orphans. They had very special childhood circumstances, right? They were not regular. They didn't have a regular kind of upbringing, and they developed into different people, right? So in qualitative studies, this question was asked. I should have brought the quote, and it kind of shows that people that are deviating have some special personal childhood circumstances. I want to just hint is that many times it's just those people's interpretation or experience. So maybe from the outside, it just look like one of the normal kids, but they felt different, okay? And when they look back, they recall that they were either very wealthy in a very poor neighborhood, they were religious in a secular environment, they were secular in a religious environment. So all kinds of difference that kind of led them to feel a little different. And when they look back on their life, people that deviated, like, we're just always a little different, right? So it's a very cohesive story that they kind of tell themselves. So the question is, we hear the story of those people deviated looking back. But maybe the story is the other way around. Maybe some people deviated, and this deviation made them to further deviate. Have you seen the Unorthodox movie? Anyone? So actually, her story actually began with her mother. Her mother, Devorah Feldman's mother, deviated. She left the community. So the mother's deviation leads to the daughter's deviation. So the question is, the deviation leads to deviation, or deviation leads to conformity? Because if you remember the Moshe figure, he deviated, and his reaction was to impose, right? He came back to the community, and his position was to impose the social norms on others. And we know historically that sometimes people that deviated kind of repent, and that the way they repent is they enforce and police the deviation of other people. So the question is, what's deviation? Deviation, or acting a little different when you're a child, what does it lead to? Okay? And deviation is a very, okay, so today in social psychology, when you want to understand something, you experiment, right? But how do you experiment deviation, right? Because isn't deviation something that has to come within, right? So the questions that people that I was working with, like, we kind of talked, and then an opportunity came by, and I want to share, and this was a part of, okay, so for a minute, I'm going to just theoretically explain why should deviation lead to deviation. So the first reason is cohesiveness. If you feel you're different, you're going to want to keep, this cohesive story about yourself, so you're going to keep deviating. And maybe when you deviate, you reassess the costs and benefits of deviation. And it's like, actually, I did what I wanted to do, and it was good. So I'm just going to keep doing what I want to do, right? So it's you reassess the cost of deviation. In the line of research, they, experiment deviation on a computer game, and they incentivized people. Okay, so they set up rules for the game, and then in the middle of the game, the people playing, participants in the study were randomly assigned, and some of them were incentivized to deviate from the norms, and they were given money. They were given money every time they deviated. So the first 3 rounds that they deviated, they were giving 10 cents. And then the research looked at the results. Did they further deviate when they didn't get money? So does the deviation lead to other deviation, If they were incentivized to deviate and they deviated, will it deviate again? Okay? And actually, this research said that people really changed their assessment of the cost and benefits of deviation, of an exception of deviation. Okay, while this was doing, so this brings me back to my postdoc. I was doing my postdoc in Princeton, and in the departments that I was at Princeton in psychology, some of the major norm researchers were working. This is Debbie Parentis, she's the chair, the president of Cambridge now, and Betsy Levy-Paluk, who was my advisor, is a professor at Princeton. So we were talking about norms and norm deviation, and this was an ongoing conversation around the table. And I was doing a different research in the Ultra-Orthodox community. I lived at the time in Borough Park in Brooklyn, and I was doing work on poverty. And I was doing work with the 4 main communities of the Ultra-Orthodox community: Williamsburg, Borough Park, Lakewood, and Passaic. Okay, and I was interviewing people about their life and about their challenges, and I was navigate their poverty. And one issue that kept coming up is people talking about the cost of their daughters' clothing. In the beginning, I didn't get it, and after a few interviews, I realized that there is a crazy social issue that is ongoing in the community. There is a very high pressure on high-end, designer clothing. Okay, it's a real social pressure. Spoke to some of the community leaders, the teachers, the rabbis, and it turns out it's a huge social issue. Okay, so I would go to like really poor families, families, and you really like I was like, so you have this really poor family, but they still had like a bag from Bloomingdale's, but sometimes they would have like a Coach bag or a Gucci bag, and those are really poor families. So it turns out that people are like saving money and doing all kind of things just to get the daughters. This is the age gap, the age between 15 to 25, when women just go bananas and spending a lot of money most of them don't have, and doing all kind of things that are illegal and illegal just to get dressed really, really with high-end clothing. And it's like a joke. Do you know Gid Giben Shior? So it's like a nice joke. Do you get it? Okay, a Gid Giben Shior is like the traditional blessing in Yiddish for the new year, which means a good, blessed year. And when I was there, I got this ad saying, may all women have a luxurious year, as we say in Yiddish, Gucci Givenchy Dior. Okay? So I think it brings up the point. And really this norm of very high-end clothing is contradicting the law of the spirit of the community. So I just want to stress, it's not dressing immodest. It's just dressing with Gucci and Dolce & Gabbana, yeah? It's a very high, expensive norm, and especially in the Satmar community, and most of the community is poor, okay? So there are some very wealthy people who can actually afford it, but most of the community is not. Yet most of the community, women spend a lot of disproportionate amount of money on clothing. And the community leaders are very bothered by it. They're trying to do a kind of intervention. I even asked why are not the rabbis intervening and saying, asur, prohibited, period. No one is allowed to buy a bag which costs more than $100. So the headmistress of a school, the largest school in Williamsburg, told me, listen, the girls have to obey so many modesty laws. We can't just add another law. We did do like a thing for a year that no one is allowed to come with bags, only with like shopping. Is this a Gucci one?
No.
Okay, so you're not allowed into the school. It's not a plush bag. So they were saying, doing these things that they can only come with like shopping bags, just like to try to control it. But they can't rule out. So it's a social issue, and people are worried. It's a lot of pressure. Okay, some feature in the community. So I think maybe we should start with this one. So the community is a community of survivors, 100% Holocaust survivors. I think it has to do with it. This notion that so many people in the community kind of have to tell themselves that they are regal. They actually use the words, we are like regal, we are like Princess Kate, we have to dress up nice. I think it's some kind of like still the humiliation of the Holocaust, or another, they live in Williamsburg, which is a very trendy neighborhood, very chic neighborhood, and they still live in a very different kind of life. And this juxtaposition of the neighborhood kind of pushes them to excel in different ways. So they're like, having a lot of fun, sitting in bars, going around, hanging and kissing their girlfriends, and having a life. But we are royalty. We dress like, queens and princesses. So it's like, it's a very materialistic thing, but it's like kosher materialism. The community is very cohesive, which usually leads to a lot of social pressure. We know it from other kind of communities. And it's a very tight social norms. There is a way to map the world. We know that there is a way to map the world around communities that are more individualistic and communities that are more collectivistic. But also there is a tight and loose cultures, which measures dwelled around the norm enforcement. And there are some communities that the norms are very loose. You can just do whatever you want to do. I think most of the American community, the research shows that it's kind of a loose, you can wear whatever you want, you can do whatever you want. The Ultra-Orthodox community is a very high, tight social norm community. You can't, everyone is watching how thick is your stockings. Obviously, you have to wear stockings, and how long is your shaitel, and everything is very, very policed. Okay, so a tight norm community has different features. So the idea came up that maybe maybe we actually can experiment deviation from norm. And this is a study that I'm going to be presenting today. So we called it Ein Tag program, which means one-day program, and we designed it with the head of the schools. It was very complicated to design it. So what we decided to do is to ask women to wear a simple dress for a day and to see how it affects them. Okay? So actually, we kind of push them to deviate from the norm. And we did it in a very, sophisticated way. So I went, this is me back in those days, I was very heavy, that's what happens. And this is with my cousin, she's Satmar. And we went to a store, and we looked around to find a dress that would be simple, that clearly would be simple, but yet you can walk with it around. Because otherwise we won't get the women to work. So it had to be in between. And we went and bought dresses. So what we did is actually we got long black skirt and we got this shirt. But in order for them to feel like they deviated and shows it, I had a big car. I drive around and I present all the women a few kinds of shirts and told them, okay, you have to choose one shirt. All the shirts were substantially uglier. So I knew that they would choose this one, okay? But they still had to choose. Actually, one woman chose this shirt, the pink and blue, disgusting. And I just took her data out because I kind of makes a mess. But too deviant. So they all chose this one. And a long skirt, okay? The study took 9 weeks because, was very, the amount of effort, and I remember I want to cry. It was very, very, very challenging because also I could not do, I had to keep that girls should not bump each other and see each other, and so I had it called spillover, so I did it in Borough Park and in Williamsburg, which are 2 separate neighborhoods, and I had to spread out. So actually, we started with a list of 400 girls that we got from the school, that the school helped us. They all had to be above 18, otherwise the IRB wouldn't approve. It took us 9 months to get IRB's approval because they were very concerned that we are mixing in within a closed religious community, and we experimenting. So it was a very interesting experience just talking to them, and I had to come to a few committees. This is a separate issue. So we started out with a list of 400. We called people and told them, we're doing this project for a day. You're going to have to do something, and at the end of the day, if you're going to follow it, you're going to get a little bit of money. Are you interested in doing it? And they would ask me, what is it? Told them, I need your approval, and then I would tell you what it is. Because actually I had to randomly assign them. And when they told me approval, I clicked on the computer, randomized the name, and got the treatment or the control. So the treatment was wearing this dress for a day, and the control was walking around with the Siddur, a prayer book, for the day. Actually, most Haredi women walk around with the Siddur in their packet. I also have one. Just like if you want to say a prayer, if you want to say Psalms, it's just like a custom. So actually, this is kind of an empty condition, but it's still a condition. So this is a control, and the clothing is a treatment. And They had to walk around for a full day with this dress. And this is why you have this reduction of number. We started with 400, but we end up with 150 because so many women said, no, 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 goodbye. Not for us. And actually it was more complicated because some of the women agreed, and when I came to their house with the dress, I was like, no, we can't do it. Or the mother would walk out. Who are you? What's Princeton? I had to make them sign that they are willing to participate. Who are you? This goyish place. And I told them, like, no, but this rabbi's approved, because I did it with the rabbi's approval. And I told the mothers, it is within the spirit of the community. It was very complicated. And it kind of ruined the study because the numbers are very small. Still, so it was a lot of hassle. But we got to do it. So those are my kids. So each person got a shirt according to their size. I had many, many shirts. And they got an envelope that we sealed. We sealed the envelope because we did not want them to open it. Halachically not allowed to open a sealed envelope. Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom. So I did not want them to open it before they kind of finished their task. When they opened it, they had to fill up a questionnaire. And 2 weeks later, I came over and they have to fill up a questionnaire just to check if there were any remaining kind of thing, which, by the way, the 2 weeks never worked. I had to go back to Israel. It was so we just have the one measurement right after the experiment. Okay, so what did we measure? We measured the psychological and social discomfort. We measure, does it affect their justification of the community? Do they see the community different after wearing those clothes? Are they having more criticism towards leadership and a different look on the community? We can look at the measures. So we measure, does their perception of themselves as outsiders change? The reassessment of the deviation from norms, evaluation of the norm. And we're going to go through the results. So you're going to see we kind of measured, well, what happens to you when you deviate? Does it make you more of a deviator, or does it make you more of different, So first of all, very strong, robust findings that deviation is costly, even though they chose to participate, right? They knew that the community has an issue with clothing, right? Still, and I can tell you that I got phone calls from the girls telling me it's so hard for me to wear this shirt. Can I take it off? I wore it for 3 hours. Is this enough? And I told them they have to walk out with the clothing. And I can't walk around like this in the street. I want to tell you something that wasn't so bad. I mean, I don't think none of you would think it's such a bad shirt, But they felt it was really deviation of the norm of the community. So at the end of some of the women, I told them, okay, just go to the grocery or just go to throw garbage. Because when you deviate from a norm and you do not do it publicly, you didn't deviate from the norm, right? It has to be publicly, So they had to walk out of their house. And some of the girls call me, my mother saw me on the street, and she's married. She told me, am I out of my mind? Why do I look like this? Or I'm scared, I'm engaged, I'm scared my mother-in-law is gonna see me, she's gonna think I'm trashy. And it was it's a real thing, For me it was it's a real thing. It was very costly, and we have a very robust finding that was very hard for them to deviate. However, those who deviate did reevaluate. This is, again, significant. And they thought in the treatment condition that it's not as hard to deviate as those who just saw the siddur. Does deviation lead to other deviations? So I asked them, would you like to get a smartphone? This is 2018, it's before COVID, and internet was very restricted in the community. It has changed a little bit after COVID, not dramatically, but it has changed. Would you like to dress more lightly? Would you like to have a smartphone? Would you like to drive I just asked them about other deviation. We have a trend, but really, no. I mean, we didn't get any effect. Deviation did not lead. I mean, this one-day project did not lead them to want to deviate more. Okay. This was, I think, a major finding. We found that people participating in the experiment were significantly more critical towards their community. First of all, there's the question, it's a system justification question that is asked all over. My community is the best community in the world. It's a classical system justification phrase, and we have a significantly less agreement with this, okay? By the way, some people, when they filled it up, they were so upset with these questions. They called me up, like, you have a question about glorification of the community, and you are one of those people that are going to go to the New York Times. We don't not want to participate. They were so mad on me just on this question, because I also asked, is there a good reason for what the askanim? I didn't ask about the rabbis, about the lesions, right? That's the word. Askanim, how would you translate? It's like, the political machers. Thank you. Amazing. How would you, those people that are like maneuver the community? So I didn't challenge the spiritual authority, but I still challenged the authority, and we got an effect. So those who were wearing, deviated, and were wearing different clothing had significantly more criticism towards the community leaders. And another question that I asked was not significant, but still we got a trend. There is a notion of poverty, that poverty is some, this romanticizing of poverty. And since so much of my work at the time was centered around poverty, I wanted to say, are people reassessing their, look on, glorification of poverty? We got a trend, but not a significant effect. Then we asked, and this was, do you want to do chesed in the community? Do you want to volunteer? Do you want to, kind of like, does it make you want to change things? So we got, this was not significant, but then we got, I hope things will change. We got a significant effect. So people that were wearing the dress hoped significantly more than those who were wearing the siddur that things would change. So it had an effect. Not a large one, but still an effect. And one of the very interesting questions is we asked them, do you want things to change? And then we asked them in an open text, what do you think needs to be changed? So only 20% of the people going around the siddur spoke about what needs to be changed. They're like, people should pray with more intense, Some people wrote, it's Satmar, they're against the state of Israel. So they wrote against the state of Israel. It was interesting to get it. Some people say people should be more, modest, everything that had to do with like spiritual issues. However, 60% of the people in the experiment condition spoke about things that needs to be changed within the community. So deviation made them think critically and think about, kind of have a perspective on the community. And like people talking about social pressure, social issues, לשון הרע, לחץ חברתי, gossip, social pressure, issues around marriage. It has to do with social. So actually, wearing this dress for just a day made them kind of have a critical perspective on their community. So taken together, we do see that public deviation from norm might be the first step to induce change. Okay, so we have not huge effects, not large effect, but we experimented for the first time ever, so that's interesting. And we get a robust finding from everything that actually making people deviate kind of pushes the boundaries. Then I'm back to Israel, and I'm dealing with all kind of different issues. And one of the issues that is very, very prominent in Israel is the fact that the Haredi community are not enlisting to the army. Are you aware of it, this issue? Okay, so this is the issue that brings a lot of rage within Israeli society, since people think like, okay, so pause for a minute. Why is this? How come? So actually, when the State of Israel was established, they were establishing the IDF, and the chief rabbis of then the Jewish community wrote to Ben-Gurion that actually it was right after the Holocaust, and there were very few yeshiva students, and they wrote to Ben-Gurion, we really want to reestablish the world of Torah, and we need those yeshiva students to stay and learn Torah, because this entire world of learning is extinguished. Can you exempt them from army service? And Ben-Gurion was 400 men at the time, said yes. If someone sits and learn, is exempt from army service. And that's led to this notion of Torato Umnato, which means someone that learning Torah is his profession is exempt from the army. This issue was okay in the first few years when we were talking about a very, very small minority that kind of had a social role or a meta-mission of re-establishing the world of Torah. Passing forward, 70 years later, we have 13% of the Israeli population, and if you factor in, other ways, with looking at a much higher number, basically 9,000 boys on a year, בשנתון, איך אומרים את זה?
Every cohort.
A cohort, which they are sitting and learning in yeshivot, where their Israeli citizens are actually dying in the war, and mothers and fathers feels like this is like why our children are sent to death, and your children, it's the lottery of the uterus. You're just born to the Ultra-Orthodox community, and you're just exempt. You don't have to go to the army. This brings a lot of rage and increases over the years, and this have been the reason for the whole political turmoil that all the continuing elections, every party saying we're going to make the ultra-Orthodox go to the army, and then when their term they say, okay, we're going to break a deal with the ultra-Orthodox community. They're going to come to our coalition, and we're going to exempt them from army service. So this has been a very, very tensionous issue. The other side of the coin that people just don't attend to is the fact that given those boys are not enlisted into the army, are not taking part of this very fundamental, crucial Israeli phase, they're being ostracized from normal, mundane life. They starts early, they don't get full, core curriculum. The boys, the women do. They can't make it back to the workforce because the way things are in Israel is like you form your networks in the army, okay? And the main thing is, according to the law, you cannot get a job if you never went to the army. So actually, those boys that are sitting and learning are being pushed away from bringing in money. They are pushed to stay many, many years in the kollel, yeshiva, and they can't get a job, because if they're going to get a job, they're going to have to go to the army. And going to the army is very stigmatized within the ultra-Orthodox community, okay? So this is the other side of the coin. People usually just see the secular side, and they don't see that actually ultra-Orthodox men pay a heavy price on not getting to the army. They cannot join the workforce. And like any norm, there is always norm deviation, right? There are those boys who deviate and decide, we don't want to stay in kollel, we don't want to stay in yeshiva, we want to go to work, which means they're going into the army. So a friend of mine and I, Yael, decided to examine those boys, those ultra-Orthodox community members who deviated from the norm and went to the army. It was very, very hard to get data. First of all, while they're in the army, they're not allowed to participate in any study. And we wanted people that served at least a year, that served with uniform, because there is many kind of like trikim, all kinds of combinations. Some of the ultra-Orthodox men just go to work, volunteer in a hospital, and it's being registered as if they went the military service. So they so if they don't wear the uniform, they're not stigmatized. So they're no good for me if I want to see how deviation from the norm affected them, right? So they had to be in the army, they had to be wearing uniforms, they had to be relatively young and five years from service, because we still wanted to see the way they feel. And we wanted to check what really affects their well-being. So we wanted to see what are the psychological factors and how is their relationship with the community. Because we know that deviation from norms really ostracize you from the community. Because how does it work? The community stigmatized people that are deviating from the norm. Why is the community doing this? Because if you want to keep people in, you have to socially enforce it. And the way you enforce it is stigmatizing. Stigmatize actually is drawing the boundaries of who is in, who's out, who's up, who's down, right? So we wanted to investigate and see. So the first study we've done is with those soldiers, and I'm not going to take you through the whole statistics, but the very interesting finding that we found is two things affect their well-being. One is self-esteem, and the other is a sense of community. So you'd think if they are deviating from the norms, they wouldn't care about the communities. They're just like, this community is trash, we don't obey by its rule, goodbye, right? Surprisingly, no. They really wanted to fit in. They really cared what the community thinks about them, and their sense of community affected directly their well-being. Okay, so what affected most their self-esteem was their income. The more money they were bringing, the better their self-esteem was, and the better the well-being was. But here's the thing, the more stigmatized and the more, this is social, community negative regard and community positive regard, is when questions like, when I walk around with uniforms, people really like me. When I walk around with uniforms, people will not call me up to the Torah. When I, measuring the policing of the community. And obviously, the more police they were, the more, you see it's negative, the more police they were, the more they felt a sense of community. So actually, it was very surprising to see that the sense of a community was still very important in their well-being, and the community is actually affecting them. The community is effective, The fact that they don't let them go to the army kind of keeps them in, okay? Then we wanted to look at the effect of stigmatizing those soldiers on the community. Does actually stigmatizing others, how it affects you as a community members? So we looked into stigma. I think it's just I'm not going to take you through the whole thing. We looked at 430 through Haredim, and okay, so first of all, okay, this is too much data, and so basically we saw again that There's two kinds of stigma. There is public stigma and there is self-stigma. It's like, to what extent the community says that I'm a failure, and to what extent I internalize it. I feel like I'm a failure, okay? And what affects this? And we have very interesting finding. Again, the key players are self-esteem and sense of community. And again, the higher your sense of community, the sense of community means like they want to be part of the community, and the weaker it is, it affects the more like stigmatized you feel. But the very, very interesting findings that actually this is a paper being published those days is what we found on the community. And I think this is such an important finding. We found that when people are stigmatizing other people, they think they punish their fellow deviator. But actually, they are punishing themselves because their sense of community diminishes. Meaning, stigma is like poison. And when you hold the poison, your hand burns and you are poisoned. So you think you like throwing poison on them by stigmatizing, but actually, the more you stigmatize, the less you think your community is great, and the less you want to be part of your community. So you're punishing others, but you're punishing yourself as well. Okay? So this was a very, very robust finding.
You say the more you stigmatize. Who is the you?
Okay, so we asked 433 ultra-Orthodox people. We asked them all kinds of the stigma questionnaire used is the international stigma that's used towards AIDS. Okay, so there's like medical questionnaire on AIDS. We did interviews with boys that went to the army, their parents, their educators, and with them we adjusted the questionnaire on stigma to fit to the circumstances, because it's not AIDS, but it is, kind of like a bad thing to do, a bad thing to have, so we adjusted the questionnaire. It's a medical questionnaire adjusted to this military, to Haredi military boys that are, going to the military service. So it's a very robust kind of almost, it's not medical, but it's what they use in the medical schools, because at the end of it, we know that there is a very strong stigma towards mental illnesses, and very, very strong stigma towards AIDS, and the stigma really affects the well-being and the recovery of people. So we just did the same thing with stigma towards ultra-Orthodox people, and we found this very robust finding, and I think it's very telling, because it's basically telling back the community members, you think you're inflicting others, you're inflicting yourself as well. This is, we called it a price that everyone pays. So stigmatizing is just bad. We have to be more acceptance. And just to close up, I want to show some data that we have, interesting data to be timely. So as I told you, I poll the community on a weekly basis. So when the Ukraine war broke, I thought it's a good opportunity to find out about military attitude towards military. So what I was interested in at the time is, do you think Israel needs a strong army? Do you personally think you have to go to the army? So I was interested to see the difference between this and this. And this was February 2023, okay? And it was very clear that most Haredim thought that 80%, you need a strong army, men need a strong training, but no thanks, not us, okay? This was like a very interesting finding. And then October 7th happened. And I wanted to see, does it has an effect? So this is the first week of October 7th. I ran the study again, and we looking at different number. We see a major increase in the willingness of the community to participate in the army, because the conversation changed. Instead of being a question of being egalitarian, it was a question of need, okay? and we see this sharp increase. And then it fluctuates, and and we have the high court ruling that being exempt from the army is very bad, goes really up. Even though they still think Israel needs a big, a strong army, this really goes down. And then, this is 38. Then we have the day when they killed some seniors, in Iran, goes up. Then we have the High Court saying the discount on kindergarten will not apply to those who learn Torah, goes down. And then we have last week's pagers, right? Goes up again. So you see that actually the community kind of reacts. And those things are, when the High Court is ruling, they don't think men needs a military service. You still need a very strong army, but we don't know who needs to do it. Basically, get us out of the story, right? And then it fluctuates. So this is actually telling that this is a political issue within the community, and also a question of the way the community feel like hunted or chased or hated or opposes the rest of the Israeli society. And I think it's very, very interesting. And I also think it's room for policymakers to see how this can be changed and affected. And I think it's just very, very interesting to see how it fluctuates. And I think this would be it for today. And I'm opening the floor for questions. You can ask me anything. You can ask me about the study and the deviation and norms, and you can ask me general questions about the Ultra-Orthodox community or anything.
Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. So what's the shidduch chances are like for the kids that did go to serve in the military? So that's one question. The other question is, there has been a lot of criticism of Netzach Yehuda for many reasons. But one of the interesting criticisms from within Israel is that actually they're taking the ones that are already in process of leaving the community. They're not really taking people that come from the community and then are expected to go back to the community. These are kids that were either already outside of the dropouts or were already kind of, this is not for me, I don't want to do this. Shababnikim. So the question is, is this really representing for you the people that are deviating but still remaining in the community? So, because the girls that you asked in the previous study, they were from the community. After one day of deviation, they came back to the community, right? But here, these are kids that are kind of on their way out. So how do you compare these two studies in that sense?
Amazing questions. Great. So I'm going to answer one by one. First of all, we asked a very clear question, because the AIDS questionnaire asked about, what are your chances to getting a good mate when you have AIDS? So we asked, האם בחור שהלך לצבא הוא בחור סוג ב' בשידוכים? Are you like second rate in שידוכים? Shidduchim is the matchmaking. Okay. The main policing core idea of the community is your reputation around the matchmaking process. Okay, so everything, the diaper you use on your 3 years old will be questioned and asked around the mate matching process. Okay, I know. I don't know if the diapers, but it's arranged marriages. So when it's an arranged marriage, the couple don't get a chance to actually see the person that they are meeting with. They dating him for 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're very modern, would be like 10 times over like 3 weeks. So you don't really get to know who you marry. So as good parents, you want to make sure that he's a normal person, compatible, this match can work. So the way you do is like you do a lot of search on the family and on the boy. It's a nightmare. As parents, it's a nightmare to just find out so much about the spouse. Because it's not that, your son will, daughter will meet a few people. You're just going to have to get so much information about each muad, each, prospective person. So people are very, very cautious to send their kids to the right school to have a good reputation and to make sure that the kids are behaving nicely for the right reputation. Just marrying off a kid, and I think this was also in the general society, when you married off a kid, you checked it. You have made your job as a parent. You send them to adulthood, you're done, right? So being able to marry a kid is like a big victory for parents, and it's the community approval, okay? Actually, when couples are done marrying off their kids, the community takes the brakes on. They can do many things. No one would say, no one would care. Okay? They are done their service fully, because their service is just to raise up the next generation and make sure they follow the line. So we asked this in the questionnaire. We also asked how it's going to affect their brothers and sisters shidduchim, because it affects their siblings shidduchim. Okay, this is what it is. So we asked it and we saw. But the interesting thing is the studies that we have done during the war, because I have surveyed the community, so I have these studies that I've done a year and a half ago, and then the war broke. And I went back to the same people and asked them. And we saw a change. So actually, this is kind of the silver lining of the war, is that the stigma towards serving, Haredi serving, has improved. Okay, we're not dying, what? But a little bit, but I want to say where it's interesting. It improved around those who don't have any family serving. Okay, so it improved in the conservative parts, which is more important. Because we asked people, do you have any family members who are serving? And do you have any close friends that are serving? Because this would affect their attitude. So we know to control it when we do the analysis. So we see that the war affected those people. We have served it for time. There's kind of fluctuation. So this has changed a drop better, especially when it comes to shidduchim. Okay, which is good. Okay, I'm willing to accept any good news. The other question you ask, okay, so first of all, yes, Netzach Yehuda is the dropouts of the Ultra-Orthodox kids who did not make it in school, or coming from very kind of edge families. Mizrachim, Chozrim B'Tshuva, the edges of the community. Our study was not Netzach Yehuda, and our study was, we controlled. So it was very hard. I told you, I didn't elaborate. It was very hard to get data. And the reason it was so hard to get data, because we sifted through. We had 560 people registering, filling out our questionnaires, but their parents were Baalei Tshuva, out of the study. They didn't identify themselves today as Haredim, out of the study. They don't want to live in a Haredi neighborhood, out of the study. So we kind of sifted through, because we knew this is an issue. We wanted people that relatively grew up Haredim and still identified as Haredim, because you're right. And this is why we end up having only 186 people, which is not a lot. But still, it's very pressured because it's good data, And yes, only you have to have good reasons why you go to the army. Each one of those people have a story why they end up going to the army. Any other questions?
Yeah. I have two questions. One is a sort of personal question, and the other is a research-based. So I thought I heard you say that the more you stigmatize those who go into the Army, the more you stigmatize your own community. Is that?
Very well put.
Okay, so the more you stigmatize our own. And what do you mean by the more you stigmatize your own community? In whose eyes? In the eyes of the community or in the eyes of the general public?
So okay, give it back. I'm just reflecting the data that we got. And the data shows that the higher you're grading the boys that went to the Army as failures, as getting second-rate shidduchim, are spiritual failures, are boys that don't have good character. It's like a whole 11. The original questionnaire is 17 items, and we brought it down to 11 kind of like. So the higher rating you gave, you kind of saw more negatively, and you stigmatized the boys, the less you thought that the community is good. So you would ask, questions like, I want to raise my kids in the community I grew up in, that my community gives me to do the things that I want. I feel self-expressed in the community. There's all kinds of sense of community, like a questionnaire. So the higher you stigmatize the community, the less you thought that the community is great. And the less you think your community is great, the lower your well-being is, because a strong sense of community is a very strong psychological protector. So it's a good thing to love your community. It's a good thing to be part of your community. It helps us go through life, So
you were raised in a Haredi community.
Yes.
Now, what is your relationship to the Haredi community at this point?
As you hear it. Okay, so I told you, Ellen Vered, I love the Haredi community. This is where my family is, the families that I raised and the families that I came from. I think there are some special, great people in the community. I think it's a community that put chesed, kindness, at its core. It's a community that put other people at its core. It's a community where people wake up in the morning and say, we want to be better people. It's a great community. However, I have a lot of criticism. I think it's a very controlled community. I think some of its aspects are very cruel. They're cruel to people who deviate. They limit people's opportunity in the world. It's a very closed, controlled community, which gives a very easy access to people to maneuver it and to abuse it. I think people gaining power in the community are very quick to abuse this power. It's very easy. I mean, power always corrupt, and when you align this power with God, Shem Yishmo. So I think there is some real problem that needs fixing in the community. So that's my take. Yes.
I want to thank you for the talk. If I understand correctly, it seems to me that the kind of nonconformity you are describing, or deviation, is a collective kind, that these are a group of people who are not conforming, whether it's, a group of people going to the Army, or a group of people choosing to wear Coach bags, or some kind of secular sign of prosperity. And I come from an American tradition. Whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist, says Emerson, in Self-Reliance. But it's often framed as individual nonconformity and forms of thought that it goes from the inside out, that you think differently than others, and then that becomes an expression of it. Sometimes it leads, like in the 60s, where people embraced Thoreauvian, Emersonian ideas and used it as a way to avoid the draft in the United States. You can sometimes see it expressed that way, or hippie culture or things like that. But you're looking kind of sort of outside in, like wear this shirt, because it's very hard, I would think, to measure individual nonconformity in this community.
People were, like, they didn't know about the other people in the community.
Right.
They were deviating individually. They didn't.
But you've already identified them as a group causing a practice.
No,
Like there aren't, they all decided by themselves to get coach bags?
No, I think I blue shirts are
Yeah, but blue shirt. Oh.
We have, like, on
Yeah,
the recording,
yeah.
they won't hear her answers unless.
Yes, so maybe I wasn't clear. Like, is the blue shirt is a deviation from wearing what?
The fancy clothes.
Wearing fancy clothes. So but the fancy clothes is already coming from some larger reaction to the culture that's clearly not in the Orthodox community. I mean, the Dior shop is not in Crown Heights. It's on Fifth Avenue. So they're clearly responding to secular culture as a group already. And then you're just kind of, yes, individually asking them to make a choice to dress down in shmata that are not so fancy. And so you have this kind of sense of, like, there is a collective that you've already identified, which is these girls that are deliberately wearing fancy stuff that's really coming from the secular world. So I think that those are parallels in terms of that joining the army is a collective group. And could it be that stigmatizing the stigmatizer feeling that their community is not so good has to do with that collective sense? It's 30% of us are not doing what we used to do. And so I just didn't understand the nature of the criticism of the stigmatizer, because I find it hard to hear stigmatizers feeling bad about themselves because of those people. But maybe what they're saying is, my community isn't what it used to be, because this a significant number of them, minority, is doing something that I don't feel is right. So I'm just wondering about that collective versus individual, and I'm sure you have interesting answers.
First of all, it's a very interesting observation. You're saying, hey, you're thinking they are confirming, actually it's deviating, because, they're. So I want to say something. Social norms are always formed around your community. So if the non-Jewish world is wearing fancy clothing, if your community is wearing non-fancy clothing, the other world doesn't matter. Your attribution of norms is always the very small group that you belong to. So the fact that you're actually observing that they are reacting, confirming to, like, a non-Jewish norm that starts in Fifth Avenue, okay, when they get in the bags, it is in many ways indifferent. It's irrelevant. It's like, we know that in the, most of the, India is the largest country in the world, right? The most population in the world. Their norms, even though they're the largest, you don't know about their norms, and you don't care about their norms. You're not aligning to their norms. You don't know them, and even if you don't know them, they don't affect you. The only norms that affect you is the people that you identify as us. Okay? So us is what counts. So when we look at norm, it's the us, whatever way we defined it. So even if we grew up in one community and then we switched to a different community, it's what we defined as us would be the norm or the norm deviation. Okay? But you are saying something that is interesting and relates. So when those girls in Satmar were deviating. They were deviating from the communities that matters to them, that relevant to them. And for them, this was a deviation. But you're alluding to a different point. You're saying not the soldiers themselves, that they chose individually to deviate. They never got into the army as a group. Each one has his own story how they got into the army. But you're saying when community members were criticizing them or stigmatizing them, they saw them as this group, not individuals, as this group that violating what our community should be standing for.
Yeah.
Right? This is what he's saying. And he's saying when they are stigmatizing, it's what? Is they saying we don't approve, right? But this is stigma.
And it's a significant number, just like you
Yes,
said,
but this is-
Ben-Gurion didn't mind when it was a small amount.
It's
But then when that number gets about 30, and look at your own numbers, you had like only once did that number go over 50%.
oh, those people didn't recruit. No. This number is they're expressed.
Only
Those are not the numbers of Haredi people who are in the army. No.
That's the first place that you have a majority of that population saying, a majority, over 50%, saying that they think that they should.
And how many people showed? Wait. How many people showed? You know how many people showed to the army
I
base?
don't know what your end was.
150.
Right.
148 actually. This is the number that they.
So it's too small.
It's 150 out of communities is 1.3 million.
Right, so it's too small an end.
So you have to understand the numbers here. 60,000 Ultra-Orthodox men get a military service waiver every year.
Yeah.
And 148 showed up. No, so it's a group, but it's
It's a drop. It's a drop in a very.
no. All I'm okay.
The end isn't big enough.
So
Okay. So okay. Oh,
Not big enough to.
yeah.
Significant,
Yeah.
there are
Okay.
158 correct.
Okay, but actually, this was the first drop. Yes, but ever since there is a few groups, like it's accumulating the numbers. Now we're looking at 1,400. The problem is some of those men that are enlisted to the army are older, and in a way they can't do the full military service, so they were sent back home. It's complicated, but still, although it's been identified of those Shababnikim, this little group that violating the group norms, they being seen as like we don't want them. We see them as bad influence in the community. Yes, Yael.
So thank you for sharing this. It's really interesting research. So I'm also, have a different spin on Steve's question in terms of how the community that's doing the stigmatizing, that it kind of affects their own well-being negatively and their own perceptions of the community negatively. And so I was wondering if you ever go back to subsections of the community that are doing the stigmatizing, right? Because it's still, small numbers, and share the results with them and say, hey, and it leads to kind of interesting conversation, or you keep kind of a real divide from the research versus the sharing of opening up conversation that could lead to, yeah.
So you actually hit the button. I personally feel that the biggest achievement would be to get the results back to the community in the largest, more pronounced ways. Not just these studies, other studies that I'm doing. I feel one of the constant results that I get is the gap between what people think to themselves and what they perceived is the norm. I don't have it in this data, but on many issues, actually not the army, but many issues, especially issues that has to do with core curriculum, issues that has to do with social issues, I ask people, what's your personal position? To what extent would you like your child, your boy, to learn math and English? 80% tell me to a very large extent. Okay, 7, not just 5, not 6, 7. Then I ask them, to what extent do you think other people in the community think that their children should get English and maths? And it drops to 22. We have this gap because it's a policed community. So everyone has like kind of his thoughts, what they think is right, but they think the neighbors don't get it. So I'm working, and this is part of what I'm doing, is to try to voice out back to the community the gaps. I do want to acknowledge that when it comes to the army, the gap is actually the smallest. Most people don't want their children to go to the army, and they think that other Haredi people don't want to send. So they actually get the norm right, but on other issues, there's a huge gap. I feel that all the social activities, should be actually bridging the gap and telling people in the community the normal lives that you seek for yourself, other people in the community seek for themselves as well. So I think it's a hard work, but I do want it to come back to the community because I want things to change, and I'm saying it out loud. I want things to change. Not everything. There's some great things that I hope will not change, but some of it.
Thank you. It was very interesting so far. So I have a couple of questions. First of all, if you ask the girls in New York, the ones that they, let's say, deviated, if they had previously done something similar, I mean, if they had an inclination, let's say, or it was the first time, this is about for New York. For Israel, the point is, you went in. You didn't go only in Jerusalem, you visited. Okay, so did you have different answers pending in the leaders of the community? And second, if you have included, I don't know, about the social stratification in each community, I mean, did you get the same results, answers from, let's say, the most well-being? Yes, exactly, in terms of money, in terms of economic importance, of the ones that they were more rich or the ones that they were more poor?
Great questions.
Thank you.
First of all, about the New York study. Unfortunately, when we got our action together to do the study, was very late. I mean, it was towards the end of my postdoc position. And you look back and it's like, I wish I would just stayed a few more weeks just to make a more of a, especially to see, did it have any effects? I left the community, COVID broke out, and a year later I called people and asked, just called them on the phone because I had their numbers. And people just did not remember. Couldn't get any data. It was very, very, it was a very well-structured design of research, was so complicated to get it through and get, everything, and my ability to, utilize this opportunity was jeopardized. So, and I think when you do field work, many times it's like this. When you do studies that are field work, there is always very strong limitation. It's very messy. I've done since another huge field work, and I thought, okay, that's it. I'm not doing this. Toda rabba. I'm not doing this kind of study. Toda rabba. Just too complicated, too hard. Now, I do want to say there is very large difference on the results depending on their socio-economical, but it's not the money. It's the two things. It's the ethnicity. If the Mizrahim, there is a difference between Mizrahim, Ashkenazim, Hasidim, and the quantum of them being modern or conservative. Because the community, the boundaries of the community, people negotiate the boundaries. They have a phone, it's a filtered phone. The level of filter is like a very, very high kind of filter that doesn't allow almost no news, or it's a looser filter on the internet that kind of, you can, surf in non-ultra-Orthodox kind of news. So generally speaking, the more modern you go, the lesser your stigma is. And when you look at, the inner subsectors, Mizrahim have the lowest stigma. They have the lowest stigma towards serving boys. They're more welcoming. Then come Hasidim, and then come the Lithuanians. So the opposition is in the Lithuanians and in the conservative. The income does not affect. By the way, the richest kind of subsector is the Lithuanians. Lithuanians, they are the better to do. So depending on your kind of ethnicity and depending on the permeability of the world, the more modern you are, the less stigmatizing you are, the more conservative you are. And we asked with 2 questions. We leveled their sociological conservatism and their religious conservatism. We correlate them and we measure, and this really shows a different effect. So great question. Anyone else? Please.
I'm sorry, I know we have to go, but I do have one question. I mean, the experiment in New York is really fascinating. Like just the way you show the power of the stigma among the girls that's super fascinating. But I want to ask, if you thought about, and I understand the way you constructed this experiment, you couldn't have done it. But, when you did the soldiers, you also gauged the community, right? To sort of understand that stigma. And you didn't do it with the girls, right? To sort of think about how they were actually being perceived. And I wonder about the decision not to do that or not to construct sort of a parallel. There's one additional part to that, because I'm curious about the decision not to do that, other than the complications, right? But you could imagine having a plant or somebody to do it, right? To sort of have people sort of think about how they responded to that stigma. And I guess it just strikes me that there's 2 stigmas going on, right? There's sort of the one about wearing the clothes that are ugly. And then there's also the stigmatizing of girls for caring too much about clothes, right? There's a gendered dynamic to this that is putting a very harsh criticism on girls because they're wearing fancy clothes, right? And that's No. But you're saying that, and maybe I misunderstood, but were you saying that people in the community are very worried about people wearing fancy clothes? Is that not true? Okay, yeah.
So it's great questions. First of all, I forgot your first one. I just remember you asked and it was good.
Oh, sorry. It was why not do an experiment to look at how people thought?
I think it's we should ask, it would be so much easier to get data on other people. Yeah. Just what do you think about girls? We did have some questions, but those questions were to those people who participate. We didn't have questions. I'm actually thinking maybe we can take the control group and use them as observers and kind of analyze it differently. It's a good idea. The best thing would be just to have a different group, just, projecting back to the community. We didn't do it at a time, but maybe we can still play with the data, do some analysis there. Thank you. It's a good idea. The other question, okay, so I want to clarify. The big question is why, if it's such a bad norm, why is it not stopping? And the answer for this is it serves too many good functions within the community. Okay, so first of all, women that are wearing high-end clothing, it's signaling that they know how to put them together, It's like a efficiency kind of test, because it's it's balebatish, that the way they call it, they don't call it fancy clothing, they call it balebatish. Have you heard the expression? A balebuste. What's a balebuste? Balebuste is like an efficient woman. She has it together. She knows to cook. She knows to keep the house. She knows to mistress of the house, but an efficient. So they call it balebatish, which means those girls have it together. They know how to play the game. Well put together, right? So they're not negatively looked at. And I feel so the people that I spoke to were concerned, was the teachers, were the, rabbis. But if you go and ask them, would you let them wear Gap clothing? They would say, no, this is like lowlives. This is like undignified. So it's tricky. Also, there is a whole materialistic thing ongoing in the community. Some people are very well-to-do. Those people are keeping there is a lot of charity in the community, an enormous amount of charity. I mean, I spoke to some groceries. They told me that some people they go to the grocery, they buy whatever they need, and their fellow neighbors are paying their grocery. And they're not cheap. They just buy expensive stuff. Some people told me we basically give families hundreds of dollars to get like new shoes. There's like a whole thing with shoes in the community. Every new school year and every like new season, kids get new school shoes. But they don't get their shoes in Macy's. They get expensive shoes. And the community is kind of like paying it for it. The wealthy people give a lot of money to poor people, and they don't give them just to break even. They give them like to be comfortable. Okay, they don't manage to always be comfortable. It's very hard to keep someone who has 8 kids to be comfortable. Yeah, it's almost unrealistically. But we're not looking, and I want to say, and this paper may be accepted, amen, very soon. It's under review. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, the community is very effective. We have a lot of poor people, and there is zero homelessness. There is very, very low height of crime. We're looking at New York, where it is plagued with drug addicts, with foster care systems that is collapsing, with homelessness. And those pandemics are non-existent in the community. The community really serves as a very strong social grid. So it's functional. The community, I mean, with all the criticisms that we have, at the end of the day, they make it, and some people are really poor. I've spoken, when I interviewed people, I looked for intersectionality, you call it, people that poor and blind, poor and mental issues, poor, I looked at people that are the least worst off, the least disadvantaged. Because there's a reason when you do research, why to interview them, that you really extract very basic things. And those people that are very least disadvantaged, if they would be belonging to other poor neighborhoods that actually living in their own neighborhoods, they would be out of the street. And those people lived in normal apartments. They were paid by the community. Their bills were paid by the community. So there is some, and part of it is keeping like a certain standard. So there's a game here. Okay, but reanalyzing, seeing them as, it's a different way of looking at the data. So thank you. Great. Any other questions?
Looking at the issue of the Orthodox and the compulsory military service, what public policy implications, if any, do you think your research has showing this gap between nominal willingness and actually, going to sign up?
Great question. Okay, and I can say that personally that's what my heart is. So I feel like there's a few things that need to be done. First of all, if the government of Israel is serious about recruiting Haredim, they have to change. They have to make it real for the Ultra-Orthodox. Actually, the army, as of now, is not willing to adjust or make it really feasible for Ultra-Orthodox. So the army needs to change these things. Those people need to go back to their community. So some work needs to be done with the community. If we know, and we know that those people coming back to their neighborhood and being arrested for their uniform, police should be there to stop this harassment. Straight and forward. I want to say, even now, 60,000 people got a law draft. Only 448 people showed up. And when they showed up, there were a violent protest from the community around them. How come you let such a protest? How do you let? There was a very violent protest of very extreme ultra-Orthodox people protesting against those people going to the army. Why are you allowing a protest for someone who is obeying the law. You should not allow this protest. You should just send police, erase each one of those posters that is violating the law. So easy. There were like 100 people there. Send 200 police. Clear as it. Be serious about it.
Call the police and they will arrest them.
No. There were 148 ultra-Orthodox people that actually obeyed the law. They came to be drafted. When they entered the Baku, there was a protest of very extreme ultra-Orthodox people protesting against them going to the army. They're protesting against someone who is obeying the law. So they are disobeying the law, right? Send 200 cops. Each 2 cops pick up one person, get them to, they are doubly crossing the law, right? Be serious about your wish. You want to draft them? Follow your own rules. They're not serious? Thank you. It serves the political system. It works great for the Israeli society. But so we're like kind of we're being blamed. It's like we eat the stinky fish and we've been thrown out of the city, you know? They don't want to do it. And the other very, very important findings that we have is those who succeed with money are doing, their self-esteem is very well. So if they want more ultra-Orthodox people to succeed, you should incentivize them with good salaries. When they go to the army, they should get ahead in the job market. They should get really good scholarship in university. Make it worthwhile. Clear and simple. So actually, if the secular society is serious about it, there is a lot that needs to be done. But it seems they are not. It's a good political issue. Maybe I want to say it's a good deal for all sides. It keeps the boys in yeshiva. It's like there's so many things around it, how it works with the community. I do want to say that given our political system is so crazy, maybe it's not bad that there is a ball that can be moved. You know, maybe it can save us from like crazy governments, you know. Every time the government goes too wild, you know, they can always know that the ultra-Orthodox can shift away to a different party because this is their only concern. So maybe. Thank you. Great question. And thank you very much. It's very nice to present.